Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni maluwanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the Crowded Mattress Studios in the beautiful Boston neighborhood of Reedville. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show, and please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is I Frazier. He is here to celebrate his debut children's book, Lauren the Cow. Before we invite our guests into the studio, we want to invite all the authors and aspiring authors who are listening to the show to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. There is a button at the top of the page that says Authors, click here. We would love for you to click on that button because it will let you know so many valuable things. First off, you can find out how you can be a guest here on the podcast. Being a guest gives you the chance in a long-form conversation to tell the world about your fantastic children's book. You can also learn about our Certified Great Read program. If our panel believes that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Certified Great Read. And with that status comes a number of really powerful promotional tools that can let parents know that your book is worthy of their consideration. Find that all at readingwithyourkids.com. Join us right now from Grand Rapids in the beautiful state of Michigan. Our guest is here today to celebrate a really inspiring children's picture book. It's called Lauren the Cow. Please welcome to the show, I Frazier. Hey, Tim, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me.
Tim, I'm excited to have you on. You have a fantastic backstory that we're going to get into in a bit. But first, tell us all about this inspiring cow named Lauren.
Sure. Well, Lauren is actually my wife's name. And this story was inspired by my wife. Only time I can get away with calling her cow. No, in all honesty, she loves cows. And she had just lost her mom, and 4 days later, we found out we were pregnant with our son, Timmy. And so as she was going through all the different hormones that a woman will with pregnancy, I came up with this story to encourage her and to motivate her. And when I wrote it, she was like, "This is really good. You should publish this." And I batted it down for almost 4 years. Needless to say, it's a great story. It's about a young cow who wants to be a jumping cow when she grows up. She is a Jersey cow, not from Jersey, but a Jersey calf style. And her mom at first says, "Cows don't jump." But she's determined. So she says, "Of course, I'm going to try and be the first one." So she goes out and trains. Tim the Fox. Apparently, I'm very creative. So Tim the Fox, named after me, goes out and helps her. And at first she jumps over little obstacles and gets better and better. And she's ready to go try the fence. And of course she crashes. After that, Tim, with a little bit of encouragement, she continues to try again. And eventually she doesn't just jump, she flies. And at the end, Mom flies up right next to her and goes, "That's right. Cows don't jump, they fly." And that's the real reason why the cow jumped over the moon. My hope is to encourage young readers to aspire to not just achieve their dreams, but to really go beyond their imagination.
I love that, and I love the mom's reaction to Lauren, letting her know, "I was right. Cows don't jump; they fly."
Yes, I had to think really hard about that piece because oftentimes when I think about being a parent, we don't want to do things for our kids, right? We want to see them try hard. And so sometimes we know best what encourages them, what motivates them. And for Lauren, she's more motivated a little bit by the "it's not possible." And that's okay. But mom knew that it wasn't just not possible. There was actually something greater to be achieved. And that's really the moral there. When you think about the mom, she was secretly encouraging to her daughter in ways that we just didn't see at first.
Yeah. You have, as I mentioned earlier on, you have an interesting backstory. You're part of our wonderful Army National Guard for many years. As you're speaking, as you're talking about inspiring Lauren the cow and how we inspire our kids, I almost feel that there's a little military kind of behind that attitude. Because I've met lots of parents out there, and we've talked about it here in the podcast, that they want the best for their kids, but they want to make sure their kids don't get any bumps or scrapes or bruises or disappointments along the line. And they would have a very different attitude towards Lauren the cow. It would be like, oh, no, Lauren, dear, you can't do that. Let's sit down and knit. That's what cows do.
Sure. And I will put myself in that category. When I see my son fall or he has trouble with something, I'm very quick to be the one who says, I can help, I can save you, I can rescue you. But to be honest, when I look at my life, it was in the moments that nobody rescued me that I realized that I had tools in my toolbox, that I was already acquired over the years of being mentored by having my parents, by being around a community of support. I already had the tools, but I needed to get up on my own. When I think about what it means for a child or in a military kind of mindset, what I wanted to encourage was this idea that, one, we don't have to do it for our children. Two, that they can achieve far more greater than when we don't necessarily hold them back. And three, our children are going to meet a lot of different personalities in their lives. And I remember my sister was negatively impacted by one teacher. One teacher messed up like the next 4 or 5 years of middle school and high school for her, where she had this negative iteration in her mind that says, I can't do it. I'm not good at math and science and things like that. And she's older than me. Newsflash, she became a teacher. I say that because we run into so many different personalities. We have to come into our own mindset of saying, how am I going to encourage myself? And sometimes being self-assured, at least for my life, doesn't always look like how my parents thought it was going to look like. I graduated college first, and then I said I was going to raise my hand and join our services. My mother wasn't too pleased. She was like, you go to college to avoid this. And even in the first weeks of being in the military, I actually stopped a suicide from happening. Now, in all of those experiences, I had to do things that were not popular, that was not something that they said you can do or you should do. I had to be very self-assured in myself to say, hey, I know what you're saying, but I know what I'm seeing and I know what's in my heart, and I'm going to choose what I know is in my heart. So you could look at it as really I interjected my own experiences and really small tidbits of what I wanted my wife to know in terms of that self-assurance. And sometimes we need to, as parents, trust the instincts of our child, which is very challenging, especially when we know them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But you're right. We do have to trust our kids' instincts. And if our kid is telling us they want to go for something, even though there's something inside us going, dude, I don't know, not quite ready, we kind of gotta let them go for it.
Correct. Here's a great example. My father, he has MS, multiple sclerosis, so it affects the nerves. And I always used to equate him, the Greek god it's gonna escape my mind right now, but it was the one who had to roll the rock up the hill as a punishment. And every time he would get it just about over the hill, what would happen? It would roll back down. And his punishment was to roll it back up the next day. And I couldn't understand why a man who was losing to a debilitative disease would choose to roll the rock up the hill every single day to a losing battle. I was the strongest person in my household by the time I was 13. And I look at those challenges and I say, was my dad there to be the one I beat in basketball to become, finally achieving? Was my dad there to show me the oil change of how to do this on the car? Was my dad there when, so forth and so forth? But my dad was rolling that rock up that hill every single day in a losing battle. One, it talks about my dad's character, but two, my dad had to trust that I was going to grow up as a man and he wasn't going to be the one who showed me how to do the oil change. He wasn't going to be the one who I beat to play when I played basketball. We have to rely so much on the things that we can't teach our children at some point. And so the better we can equip them to say, try that on your own. Let's see you do it. Try again. Let's see your friends do it. We might be watching from afar, but that's truly inspiring and motivating a child to be like you. You're the way that you are for a reason. It's based a lot of times off of our challenges. And if we coddle our children a little too much on those challenges, they don't develop into the men and women that we are. And so there's times where I have to discipline my son. I don't want to do it, especially when he has these cute eyes and I'm inside laughing at what he did. But I also know I'm raising him to be a man like me. Mm-hmm. And if my wife married a man like me, there must have been something she liked about me. So there must be something she's going to like about how I am disciplining my son to grow up and have some of those aspects like me. We might spend the next 10 years trying to get over what our parents did, but we can at least instill a few nuggets of gold.
Yeah. One of the expressions we hear a lot these days, and certainly nothing that you've described so far falls into this category, but I know a lot of people equate the military and traditional male kind of roles under this label of toxic masculinity. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you see as the difference between just growing up and being a person, being an honorable, respectful person that goes and works really hard for everything that they want to achieve, and what people are calling toxic?
Sure. And that's a pretty deep question, I might add. When I think about toxic masculinity, and especially in the military, we have a duality where we're supposed to be these great citizens, but then on the backside, there's a lot of things that we have to have almost this animalistic side to us, where it's this gruesome side of having to do some of the things that other people don't have to do, where it involves hurting people sometimes or for the sake of protecting. Toxic masculinity is just that. It's toxic, meaning there's no balance to understanding it. And so it's not to say that there aren't positive energies in there, but without a strong balance, it becomes a destructive force. And so a masculine identity, if I simplify it, could be very destructive, but it can also be orderly. If I simplify a female energy, it can be very, very creative, but without limits. And so how do you allow something to grow in a particular direction? Well, you have to prune it. You have to trim it here and there. You don't go out there with garden shears or an axe and cut half a tree off and expect it to grow. That's toxic masculinity. But instead, if you come out there with scissors and you trim it, you allow it to grow and flourish. And so when I think about the balance between these things, especially in a world where we're trying to understand our relationship with our spouse, the relationship with different gender understandings, without getting into the details, what we need to recognize is that there needs to be a balance in how these two things flow with one another, your conscious and your subconscious. So really, when you took my life, for example, I just said my dad had MS. My dad wasn't working. My mom was the breadwinner in the household. For me, I was actually very challenged because I didn't grow up with a male figure being the dominant person in the home or the dominant breadwinner. And so now I'm going out in the world, especially in the military world where they have more traditional families and going, what does it look like for me to have balance with somebody else when that's not been my experience? So I think that when we really look at those things, especially for children, especially for young adults, as they continue to grow, is recognizing that there needs to be an appreciation for both creation and parameters, order. And the more that we allow both of those things to develop, it's no different than letting your left and right hemispheres of your brain grow. And if we can combine those, imagine the wholesomeness that can come out of that.
I love that idea of helping our kids develop a sense of balance, of understanding. Yes, we want you to be creative. We want you to go out there and to express yourself, but you also have to have these limits. And you can be creative, but you got to make your bed in the morning. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything done. You're just going to, create something here and let it go, and create something here and let it go, and you're not going to finish anything. And the same is true with somebody who's very ordered and got it together, but they're just doing the same thing over and over and over. And so I love that balance. Help our kids develop that balance.
Yes. And the other thing that talks about balance is really what I call empowering somebody to find that motivation within. When we think about, when I think about generations, like the baby boomer generation, for example, they created jobs for other people, and they really created a vastness of infrastructure for our world. When I think about millennials and some of the other generations after, I think of people who say, I work for a person, not for a business. And so whoever is their person they work for, it's like, hey, I work for Joey, I work for Jill. And if Joey and Jill aren't there, well, I don't really want to work for this company. And it's so interesting how that has shifted. And the reason why I put that in perspective is saying, well, what motivated that person? Is it Joey? Is it Jill? Versus the baby boomers, what motivated them? Was it something internal, a mechanism, a desire for their community? How do we find the balance between being self-motivated, or how do we discover that being self-motivated and balance that out with our outside resources and our outside experiences? We talk about the military, and there's a lot of thought about it being structured and disciplined and maybe even being over the top. But I like to remind people, you can't fire anybody in the military. It's really, really hard. So if you don't know what motivates or inspires a young warrior who you're serving or who's on your team, good luck, because you're going to be with somebody who's not going to perform well. Mm-hmm. We have the luxury of saying, hey, let's go find somebody else who thinks like me. Over there, you don't have the luxury. They might not think like you. They might not believe in what you believe in. So how do you find and empower and motivate them to aspire them to something greater? And likewise, when I think about our children as they're growing and as they're finding this balance, how do we empower them to find that internal mechanism that just turns, that says, this is why I tick? And that, to me, is so beautiful. And I think it comes with trials. I think it comes with determination. I think it comes with trying again and failing.
Yeah. It's interesting as you were talking about, in the military, it's really hard to fire someone. You're out in the battlefield, you just can't fire this guy or, tell him to go in the corner and have a timeout. That's true in our families. We just can't fire our kids. You can't fire. There might be people in our families that we're not vibing with at the moment, but they're always going to be part of our family. And it's a lot better to figure out a way that we can get that vibe together and that we can work together and that we find a way that we can help that person, whether it's our kids or a brother or sister or uncle, help that person become all that they can be to be part of our family.
You're absolutely right. I think one of the things that's hard about doing that is you really have to come from a place of being in someone else's shoes when you do that. There's two sides to that. I used to have a friend who used to joke never talk about somebody until you walked a mile in their shoes. And then he would pause and say, because then you're a mile away and you have their shoes. And we would laugh about it. But it was kind of funny because you're thinking, oh, wow, what is he really saying here? And I took on a different approach, especially when I was more of a senior positioned individual in the military and even in my civilian job, where I said, you know what, I'm going to listen to everybody convinced that they're right first. Even if in my heart I cringe at their thought process. And the reason why is because I want to say I'm in their shoes. I'm feeling what they're feeling. I'm having true empathy, right? Empathy is really coming from an idea of compassion. And if you look up the true understanding of compassion, the etymology of it, what you find out is it means to suffer with in Latin. So you're suffering with somebody. And so I think in order to really understand why a thought process is flawed, we have to have empathy for that thought process, which means we have to suffer with that thought process. We have to understand how it creates a narrow thinking as opposed to just being angry and clash with it. Well, that means really being in somebody's shoes, listening to them, convinced as if they're right, so that when we understand it, we internalize it to a point of saying, how would I take myself from their thought process to a new line of thinking that can encourage me to expand and go beyond that? Yeah. And so that's really, at least for me, where I've had to start. And it's hard. There's some times where I so disagree with somebody and I say, I'm going to listen to them, convinced that they're right, as if I'm going to argue their point, because then I have a much better understanding of working through that. I wrote another book called Faith Arising, which is, I would say it's more of a faith-based book, but it's talking about your spiritual growth stages of working through some of the things that we're talking about. And one of the things that I think about is like a vine that wraps itself around a tree. If you treated a vine like a lie, what happens over time is it intertwines with the trunk of a tree so much that it creates grooves. It becomes embedded in the lifestyle or the build or the growth of a tree. You don't just cut down half the tree to try to get rid of the vine. You have to surgically remove it. And so when you think about the lies in people's lives and we want to be angry about it, we have every right to. But not to cut down the tree. We have to surgically remove every vine, and it's still going to leave grooves in that person's life. It's still going to leave grooves in this place that they might be vulnerable or exposed. And so I think when we think about it from that level of sensitivity, then we can recognize even when someone doesn't believe what we believe, or we are frustrated because it's such problematic thinking. Taking a sensitive and more empathetic approach can lead to greater results and outcomes.
Yeah. Well, I think our nation would be certainly a lot better served if people did have some more empathy for each other and would take the time to kind of put themselves in someone else's shoes and think, instead of having that knee-jerk reaction of, you disagree with me, you're in the other team, you're scum, and I don't want to have anything to do with you. And instead saying, no, this is a person that I've known forever, and they're caring, and they do have a difference of opinion with me. So why don't I take a minute to figure out why that is?
Yeah.
This has been a really fascinating conversation, Tim. I love this. You mentioned that you've written other books. This is your first children's book, I believe.
Correct.
Now that you've written Lauren the Cow, and your wife didn't kill you for equating her with a cow, which is very impressive. Do you have the kids book writing bug? Are there going to be more kids books coming from I Frazier?
There will be. I'm taking some time to learn the whole process that's involved with writing a children's book. My first book, I had zero marketing, zero plan, zero idea. with the children's book. I'm excited about it. I finally put together a marketing plan. It seems to be successful. So once I really think that I've got some good takeaways, there's a couple of other books that I have in the back of my mind that are brewing that I think will come in the next 2 to 3 years.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to see what's going to be coming from you. In the meantime, we should know where to go to find out more about you and about your books and about Lauren.
Sure. So my website is the best place to start. There's connections to all my social media from there. It's ifrazier.com. That's TIFRAZIER.com. And from there, you'll be able to see all my links to YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Lauren the Cow. Our guest has been the author I Frazier. Hey, Tim, thanks so much for being with us.
I appreciate your time, Dad. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We hope that it inspires you to make the commitment to sit down and read with your kids every single day. Do you know that if you read with your young ones, your 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, for just 20 minutes a day, every day, by the time your kids get to school, they will have heard over 800,000 to 1 million more words than their peers who were not read to. What an incredible advantage that your kids will have. We also hope that you'll be inspired to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And the way to make sure that you don't miss a single minute of the show is to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, I Frazier. Please be sure to check out Lauren the Cow. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Will Cheever, Jordan Saley, Stephanie Davila, Cassandra Masonet. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.